For centuries, we've stared at the pyramids, we've looked at all the artifacts from ancient Egypt, and we've wondered, who were the people that built all this? But what if I told you the biggest secrets weren't buried in tombs, but were actually locked inside their very cells? Today, we're diving into a groundbreaking genetic discovery that is literally rewriting the story of one of the greatest civilizations in history.
It seems like a simple question, right? But the answer is surprisingly complex. Were they this totally isolated civilization that just popped up along the Nile Valley? Or were they more of a melting pot, a crossroads for the entire ancient world? For a long, long time, historians and archaeologists, they had their theories, but a huge piece of the puzzle was always missing. You see, Egypt's climate, super hot, super dry, it's fantastic for preserving things like mummies and monuments. But for DNA, it's absolutely terrible. That delicate genetic code, it just breaks down over thousands of years, which has made it nearly impossible for scientists to get a complete genome from the time of the pharaohs. And that has left this massive gap in our understanding.
But that all changed with one incredible find. And this isn't just about data and charts. This is a story about one person who lived almost 5,000 years ago and carried the answers we've been looking for inside his bones.
He was found at a burial site called Nuwayrat, and his remains were preserved in this really unique way. How? Well, he was buried, get this, inside a huge ceramic pot. And that pot likely acted like a shield, protecting his DNA from that harsh environment and giving scientists the first ever complete genome from Egypt's Old Kingdom. Just amazing.
So, who was this guy? Well, from his remains, we can actually build a surprisingly detailed picture of his life. He lived to be pretty old for the time, somewhere between 44 and 64. And his skeleton, wow, it tells a fascinating story. His joints, especially in his back, show signs of severe osteoarthritis, the kind you get from a long, long life of really intense physical work. And this is where it gets really interesting, because that is the central puzzle of the Nuwayrat man. He was given a high-status burial, the kind usually saved for the upper class, but his body tells a story of hard labor. Some researchers have even pointed out that the specific wear and tear on his bones could be from the life of a potter, which would be a pretty cool connection to his unique burial, right? But the biggest mystery was still waiting to be solved. After all these thousands of years, what story would his genome finally tell us about where he came from, and about the origins of Egypt itself? So when scientists finally sequenced his DNA, they weren't just looking at one man's family tree. Nope. They were opening a genetic time capsule from the very dawn of the pyramids. And here is the first major clue. His genome wasn't just one single solid block of local North African ancestry. Not at all. It was a mix. The vast majority, about 78%, was related to local Neolithic North African groups, which is kind of what you'd expect. But it was the other 22% that changed everything. A full 22% of his genetic makeup traced all the way back to the eastern Fertile Crescent. We're talking about the region of ancient Mesopotamia. This was the bombshell. I mean, this wasn't just a tiny trace amount. It was a huge genetic signature from hundreds and hundreds of miles away.
And this is a really, really big deal. We've always known that ideas and technology traveled. Archaeologists have found proof that things like writing, the pottery wheel, and certain crops made their way from Mesopotamia to Egypt. But this genome, this is the first direct biological proof that it wasn't just ideas that were on the move. It was actual people.
But the story of the Nuwayrat man isn't the end. Actually, it's the perfect starting point to understand a much bigger, more dynamic story of Egypt's population over time. Using this new genome as, let's call it a genetic baseline, scientists could now compare it to other genetic data from people who lived 2,000 years later and from people living in Egypt today. So this gives us 3 snapshots across almost 5,000 years of history. And when you lay it all out, the results are crystal clear. Back in the Old Kingdom, you see this mix of North African and Mesopotamian ancestry. Fast forward about 2,000 years, and suddenly there's a big increase in ancestry from the Levant. And then, in Egyptians today, you see all those layers, plus a more recent and substantial arrival of sub-Saharan African ancestries. The takeaway here is undeniable. That whole idea of a single, unchanging Egyptian population totally cut off from its neighbors, it's a myth. The real genetic story of Egypt is one of constant movement, of mixing and of change, shaped by trade, by empires, and by migration over millennia.
So, why does the DNA of one man who lived so long ago matter so much to us today? Well, because it fundamentally changes how we see one of the world's most foundational civilizations.
It completely reframes ancient Egypt. It wasn't some cultural fortress protected by deserts. It was a dynamic hub, a magnet for people and for ideas from all across the ancient Near East and Africa, right from its earliest days.
This one single genome has a powerful legacy. First, it blows up that old, static view of Egypt. Second, it proves that human migration was a key driver of cultural exchange. It also shows us that, with the right conditions, we can unlock genetic secrets even in the toughest climates. And maybe most importantly, it deepens our understanding of just how connected our ancient ancestors really were.
The story of the Nuwayrat man proves that a single person, their story, can rewrite history books. It really makes you wonder, right? As this technology gets better and better, what other ancient mysteries, the ones we've always thought were unsolvable, are just waiting for us to find the right key?